I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's webinar. We are having a Q&A session on specialization in naturopathic medicine. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Corey Murphy. I'm the Executive Director of the EndoANP, and I'm also privileged to be the Executive Director of several other specialty societies, specialty associations within the naturopathic profession, and I've been involved in almost all of them at some point or another. So while I'm not a physician, I hope that I might be able to help contribute to tonight's panel, and there might be some areas that I might be able to shed some light on in the area of specialization within this community. So basically the format that we're going to do, you can see on the webcam, we have 3 of our board members on webcam, and we have a couple others lurking in the wings. We have Dr. Alan Christensen, our president. We have Dr. Leela Turner below him, or at least it's below on mine. Mine looks like a big punch grid.
We're doing Hollywood squares here.
Yep. Who's our vice president? Fiona McCullough, who's also joined us. And we have Andrew Rubman on the phone as well, and may be joined by a couple other of our board members. But basically the format that tonight is going to take is we, hopefully a lot of you already either attended live or listened to our actual specialization webinar, which we had a couple weeks ago. And so based off of that, we got some questions submitted. So we kind of went through those and kind of combined and condensed. So we're going to start tonight by addressing those previously submitted questions. And Dr. Christensen is kind of going to moderate those and kind of pose those out to the board. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and open up a live Q&A. Feel free to ask any and all questions. Don't feel like they have to be endo specific. If they're just kind of specialization in general, that's more than welcome. And you can either type them in the GoToWebinar chat box if that's more your style and you'd rather write. If it's a little bit more involved or you'd rather say it out loud, there's a little hand icon that you should see there. You can raise your hand. And if you do that, I can unmute your line and you can ask the question out loud. So whatever format is your preference, we can do. But with that being said, let's go ahead and kind of get into some of this. So I'll pass the mic over to Dr. Christensen and we can start talking.
Pass it over here to the side. Or...
This way for me.
Oh, you're that way. So I'm
we're probably
the picture. Okay, so yeah, welcome. Glad to see everyone here, and great event. Excited about this. So we had a lot of questions pre-submitted, and there was a lot of overlap in terms of the concepts. So like Corey said, we condensed these down into a handful. We'll cover these in good detail and discuss it amongst the board and Corey, and we're also excited to take live questions that come in. So first one we got, are there subspecialties within the association? For example, fertility specific. So board, what have we got about subspecialties?
I can comment on that. I mean, I don't think we have anything like that currently, but I really think that that would be something that we could naturally form as we meet more members with specific interests. Like I'd be very interested in forming a group on PCOS if anyone's interested in that, or, you know, I know Amatma would be interested in fertility. So I think it really depends on where the interest lies, but we could definitely do that.
I need you to say the question again, Alan. I couldn't hear you.
Are there any subspecialties within the association? For example, fertility specific?
Yeah, I agree with what Fiona said. I'm kind of excited that we have the social media just starting to get off the ground and actually start to see kind of what the interest is. I think anytime we can ask each other or ask colleagues for some kind of clinical advice on case-specific questions or studies that come out, I think at this point we don't have enough involvement to have subspecialties yet, but I think there's definitely the potential for that. I think the more important thing is us just getting some momentum off of the ground as the EndoANP.
Right, I agree with that entirely. I think that subspecialties will eventually emerge within our association. I'm particularly interested in the changes surrounding menopause and also looking at what happens with the system after menopause in women. It's particularly intriguing to me as So I'd be interested in speaking with people about that.
Yeah, and early along in the organization, there was even talk about having formal subspecialties from the get-go. And within endocrinology, there are very distinct subspecialties. There's a lot of core common understandings, but then there are those that are quite narrow and even more deeply niched. And just to give everyone some perspective too, we did also take that into account in creating the examination for board certification. So the examination is with the expectation that someone will have a good broad understanding in endocrinology in general, naturopathic endocrinology, but it was not written in a way to where you'd have to be a master of every subspecialty to the nth degree. You know, I wouldn't want to pass something that Fiona had written on PCOS or that Amama had written on fertility. But I'm confident that with a good understanding of naturopathic endocrinology in general, one could do well on the exam. And as we mature, yeah, we can have much more formal communities and connections in these other niche areas. But even right now, involvement in the organization does give you access to training within subspecialty topics, including fertility being a big one, thyroid care, PCOS, female hormone replacement, diabetes, these other ones. So that's the idea, and we can take that further. And the exciting thing is that we've been around for 4 years, but there's a lot of things we are putting into place. And so this is a great opportunity for members to really form our future based upon great ideas and input just like that one. Other comments from the board about subspecialties?
One other thought, you know, Corey, I don't know how if all of our attendees tonight maybe know who you are. And I don't know, do the other specialty boards have subspecialties that have they brought this question up?
Great question. So with working with the other groups, you know, I have found that endocrinology is actually very unique in that area. You know, pediatrics is a broad field, but a lot of pediatrics, the PDAMP, they kind of do A to Z, but with kids. And the Oncology Association, which is kind of the biggest, kind of been around the longest group. Yes, there are a handful of people who definitely just focus on breast cancer or a specific cancer, because over the years they've kind of found their cancer specific. But even within that, that's actually a very small range. A lot of people do the A to Z cancer. So in joining, you know, and working with this group, I've realized more than any other group, this group really does have, because I think what I find is this group has subspecialties, not, I wouldn't say to the exclusion of the other subspecialties, but they're so distinct and different. Not that they're not interconnected, but it's so complex, different systems. So this is actually in that way a very, very unique group. And I agree with what everybody else said too. And a great way to start subspecialties is to be part of this organization, but we start forming little you know, clubs or little study groups, or we realize, oh, there's an interest in this. So we start doing like pods of webinars. So we do a 3-part series in this area and a 3-part series in this area. So I can absolutely see that becoming the evolution of where we go, but we don't want to break apart too fast. You know what I mean? We want to make sure we get our core solid and then break apart.
Okay, I'll keep moving along. The second one is a 2-parter, and I will present it as such. I'll do the first part here initially because they were distinct. Is there a curriculum set in place to define the knowledge base of an EndoANP certified member? So is there a clear curriculum set in place to define our knowledge base?
You're going to laugh at me, but you need to repeat the question again, Alan. I'm trying to make sure our chatting thing here. Can everyone see our chatting over there? I just want to make sure that if other people have questions, they can post it.
Yeah, so the chat box, when you sent it just to organizers. When you write a question, Leila, you can pick 2, and you can either pick entire audience so everybody can see it versus just the organizers and panelists.
So
there. So what you
entire audience doesn't work.
I don't have the
like
option.
It's not an option for me either. Yeah. So
I can only message organizer or panelists only or the presenter only. It doesn't look like I can ask questions to the whole group. So as long as somebody can view whether or not all of our attendees are posting questions.
Yeah, I can view them. So I'll make sure.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So to repeat the question, this was about, is there a defined knowledge base for membership? And this was not about fellowship, but about membership, if there is a defined knowledge base that we have.
I think for the way that we were coming at things were that if you are interested in endocrinology, even if you're not specialized, even if you don't have a lot of special knowledge, but you just want to learn, then membership is for you. And it can be for students, it can be for anyone, no matter where they are in their journey, even if they're not specialized in endocrinology, just if they want to learn more. And then the board exam is really where you're going to see like that curriculum where, you're going to have that special knowledge. You're going to have to be able to pass the boards to be able to call yourself a fellow. And I think that's where the distinction is. So you can either join, just be interested and learn, as much as you can, or you can go to the extra level and do the exam.
I also think being a member and being able to post that, say, on your website. I know that when I talk with patients right now, being able to say that I'm a member of the Endocrinology Association, they kind of go, oh, there is an naturopathic endocrinology association. I think that say that and the word correctly gives a little bit of credibility, and telling them that the board exam is in development. It's a credibility thing, and I think that really helps. I've been very hesitant to jump on the specialization, and I think it's funny that I've been on the board for 3 years and I'm still a little bit hesitant to do it. And I think, I don't know how many of the attendees got to see our replay of the webinar that we did last week, or whenever it was, 2 weeks ago. But I think it's not about saying that you don't treat everything else. It's just about saying that you're accredited in an additional field and being able to say, I've had additional training. And I also think that distinction between being a EndoANP member is just being a part of the association. Members are not required to take the board certification exam. The board certification exam is there as an offer for those members who would like to call themselves a fellow.
I have an addition. Oh,
yeah, I think that's a great point of distinction. I know that personally, I found that trying to be a generalist in naturopathic practice, I became more and more interested in endocrinology as a area of concentration because of its broad application, literally throughout the entire lifespan, and trying to get information about naturopathic approaches to endocrinology intrigued me. And so I was very excited to find out when the association was being formed and wanted to participate. And so I think that almost like we do in naturopathic education, and afterwards, there's a very regional environment where we're interested in sharing with one another, benefiting from one another's experience and perspective, and having an environment where colleagues can get together with that emphasis of naturopathic approaches to endocrinology.
This is Nicole Ortiz, also board member, and one of the things that we as board members defined as a goal to really organize in the next coming year. It's not a huge part of what our member benefits are yet, but just that we are a resource center for quality and credible, resources. Really, it doesn't matter if you're in the journey of just becoming a naturopathic doctor or you're already super specialized in endocrinology. There's a lot of fads and a lot of competition out there. We have functional medicine practitioners all over the country that are frankly basically saying that they do similar or same things as us, and even in the research field, just looking at different fads versus facts. And we want to be that place where you can get credible information that is founded in research, but also in the clinical wisdom of naturopathic medicine. And so that's kind of a goal. I know that's something of mine that I was very excited about as being part of the governing board here, is to make sure that happens.
Other comments about that one?
I have an add-on to that from the person who posed that question, who wrote a comment. So kind of the follow-up to that, or kind of the spin-off too. So that's kind of talking about, criteria or curriculum or whatever for membership, which we kind of, explained that's not necessary. But as far as how was criteria developed for the board certification, and what's kind of the study process or study guide for that. So that was kind of the follow-up question to that. So I'll put that out to everybody.
How do you develop the process for our board certification questions? So in terms of making the initial template, and I guess that was the first step, is we created a template and an outline. We worked through the main areas that were relevant in the endocrine system that had clinical facets to naturopathic practice, and we gave weights and percentages on those. We had topics such as thyroid, adrenal, ovarian health, pancreatic health. We kind of took the main endocrine organs and then broke them down into percentages of their clinical relevance. So things such as the pineal gland, for example, didn't have large amounts of clinical relevance, not a lot of action steps or data points around that, but certainly some, so it was a lower percentage. And from there, we broke out questions that were tied into just best practices and went through and vetted questions, checked them amongst all of the board members to confirm they were ones that were reasonable to a generalist. And I guess to expand on the point that I made earlier, that's how we did confirm that, because amongst the board, some of us have subspecialties that are quite defined, but we made sure that the questions were ones that those of us not within that same subspecialty could be competent to respond well to.
I'll add two other things to that piece also, is that luckily the EndoANP also had the ONC-ANP and the PED-ANP blueprint to look at to see what was a good structure for kind of an outline for a naturopathic board exam. So they didn't have to start just straight from scratch with that. And I also believe in the early start of that, we also looked at the conventional endocrinology kind of layout of like what are the different categories, that they're looking at, to make sure we didn't miss kind of a major area. And the only other thing I would add to that, because I think it strengthens the blueprint, is our board now is very different than the board 3 years ago that originally put this together. So it's nice because it's had a lot of different eyes on it. We had Lorinda Sorensen and Satara Tice and Mona Morstein and Jacqueline Chassie. So we had a lot of different eyes on it, including this board. So it really has gone through a lot of different kind of leaders in this profession. So yeah, I just wanted to add that piece in too.
I'm also
great point.
Go ahead, Alan.
No, you're all good, Leila.
For the people that also don't know, I think it might be interesting to hear what we've done so far. Alan already went through and explained how we came up with the blueprint. Once we made the blueprint, we essentially spent about a year writing exam questions, and we wrote way more questions than we would need. And then this summer, we got together as a board and we reviewed every single question in groups. And so all of the questions essentially were vetted by other members on the board. And if the question didn't make sense, or if there were too many close right answers, we threw out a chunk of the questions, and we kind of consolidated the questions down to what we felt like were really good, solid, evidence-based questions that was representing how well we understood the clinical material. And that's kind of where we're at in preparing the exam. And then we'll be moving forward, probably offering the exam, I would imagine, by next year, early next year, Corey?
I was on mute. I was going to say, I think our application is starting very soon, like in the next few weeks, you should be seeing the application and start that process. And so just the timeline of things, application, needing to review the application, study time, I'm going to say summer.
Do you want to comment on what is in the application? Do you remember some of the requirements? I know that there's a few clinical requirements. There's a certain number of years in practice in order to be eligible to even apply to take the exam, or do we just want to refer people to the website for that info?
I think
we could mention that. That's great to mention.
Yeah, I can do a really quick, really high level thing, not any detail. Basically, there's kind of we tried to create several different paths, and basically there's experience, and there's several different ways you can prove your experience. It's either certain number of years in practice with patient contacts. It's doing maybe a residency that's more focused in that. I believe we also kind of have an avenue if you are like teaching endocrinology. We try to think of what are our different types of people, and so how could they kind of prove that experience thing. Then we have cases. So everybody has to write up cases that are then blinded and reviewed by the board. And then After the cases, you also have to have a certain number of continuing education credits, which most everybody has to do for their license anyway. And then assuming all of that is on the up and up, then you're approved to sit for the board exam. And the one thing that was a follow-up question too, to add into that, as far as the study guide materials, every question that was written had to have a reference associated with it. That's kind of the rules for testing. And so basically the study guide we'll have a reference list of references that were used in creating the exam, is just kind of a direction to kind of point you in addition to giving you guys the blueprint. So that's kind of the study materials that you'll get from us, and then clinical knowledge. And the only other little thing I'll add there is, these questions are not meant to be, did you read this article and can answer this question? If you are truly specialized and have advanced knowledge, I'm not saying you should, be able to just sit down and pass it, without looking at anything. But in theory, this is not like I crammed for a test and passed it. You should have the clinical knowledge to be able to answer, hopefully a lot, if not most, without even, studying, if you will.
I did a ton of questions that were outside my subspecialty, and I will vouch the fact that it's reasonable.
Yeah, me too. And
So
they're
we
very
also don't-
practical. They're like things that you would see like in your actual patients and blood tests that you really need to be able to identify. So there's a lot of really practical questions too.
So there was another follow-up question to that question that I didn't yet get to from the very beginning, and that was, is there a consensus in terms of best practices for naturopathic endocrinology? Is there a consensus for best practices?
Do the words consensus and naturopath go together?
That's funny. Can they be in the same sentence without the sentence exploding?
Enough that we all agree.
I love. Well, I love what
this
Nicole said about.
And Andrew Rubman, I think that it's an ongoing process. It's continually morphs. We discover more and more about what it is that we're studying. We come to the table and to conversations with different spins and ideas. We test the relevance of it by looking at the literature, by seeing what happens with our patients, to be very honest with you. That's why they call it practicing medicine. And by discussing it with our colleagues. And so I think that the consensus is continually refining and emerging. And that's really I think the most valuable piece of joining the EndoANP is having access to people who you can bounce things off and you can hear about emerging ideas.
I think consensus about what not to do sometimes is a little easier to land on, and us landing in consensus, that is almost a separate issue than the board exam. There's the board exam, which is really us just testing our clinical knowledge, and there's probably a consensus on what we feel was the right answer and the wrong answers. Separate from the board exam, the EndoANP is there to, yes, as we move forward, try for us to kind of develop some consensus on how we treat things. And I think that that's what us coming together will help and facilitate. But we don't have a position statement on how to treat X, Y, and Z. Because, the vaccine position statement, for example, that took how many years and how many revisions? And even that statement, which is, probably very thoroughly discussed in the PED Association. So that's a big question, but I think differentiating the board exam, which is a very specific piece, is different than the bigger picture of what EndoANP could be for its members.
Another point to throw out is that the EndoANP is not a regulatory organization. We're not saying here are the appropriate practices in this situation or that situation. Our goal is being an educational institution, so we can help garner best practices and discuss them and refine them. And I think it's more important that we establish best practices on how to come to conclusions rather than so much position points. Not this is the best way to do something, but this is the best way to come to that best way. This is the best way to think it through. And here's some experience from the various members of the board and the membership at large as well. And another way I think in which endocrinology in naturopathic practice can be unique is that in many areas, doctors are prescribers, and hormones, thyroid hormones, replacement hormones, adrenal hormones, these are all powerful compounds. So it does take a certain sense of not so much rigid protocols, but a sense of just respect and caution in how things are done. And so that's something we really wish to instill in the membership, is a respect for the power of these resources we have at our disposal and the means to think through these decisions critically and carefully. Are there comments on that one? Okay, I'll keep rolling along. Next question, how would you approach board certification in pre-licensed or registered states where there are more limitations in prescribing? So how does this all affect doctors in states in which they are not licensed prescribers?
I think being a part of an association that has your back a little bit would really help the credibility of the physicians practicing in unlicensed states. You might not be able to prescribe in the same way as you could in a licensed state with a scope like Arizona, for example, but I think being a part of an association, any extra credibility, I think would really help protect you and help.
And there's so much more about endocrinology than just prescribing hormones. So there's the effects of diet on our hormonal systems. There's just so many of the different naturopathic treatments that we can use without having the scope. So we're going to be covering all of that as well in our educational webinars.
Yeah, diagnostics.
Yeah, very well stated. In Connecticut, for example, we have no prescriptive authority, and so we have to deal more with diet and nutrition, things that would be considered to be OTC, and realize that many of these interventions will have profound effects on endocrine function and balance. And so it's a little bit like I remember John Bastyr telling us at National College when he was a student there that remember to have a good pair of strong hands and a bucket of hot water, and we can do 75% of naturopathic medicine. So I don't bemoan Connecticut, but it's a good challenge.
Can I chime in here?
Please.
So something I would add, this is a great question, and this is a tricky question, right? Because board certification, what's the value in it if I can't even claim that I'm an ND? Or, every state and every jurisdiction has its different thing. There's a certain point of a little bit of a field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. There's no reason for any licensing board or any entity to approve specializations or those accreditations or FABNO or FABNAMP or FABNE until they exist, right? So we have to build the need for something to be recognized. So that's kind of a thing. It is tricky in unlicensed states, but again, I think I would argue the same thing what Leela said, and also it's an added thing. It's a patient safety thing that in some ways, in theory, you could say this could maybe help licensing efforts to be like, hey, there's this extra elevated education that some people can get in the naturopathic profession, and try to, kind of make inroads in that. So, everybody wants more licensing. That's not obviously our top priority, but I definitely think that the idea that EndoANP kind of in that sense, is a great, or it's nice to have an organizational backing. You know what I mean? When you're saying, hey, I have this advanced knowledge, and look, I went through this process and I took this exam and I'm accredited, and you might not recognize it, but they do. And hopefully, it will catch on. But it's tricky.
I just thought of one more possible. one more possible angle behind the question would be just logistic or tactical. If someone could apply and could be a fellow if they were not in a licensed state, and they certainly can. There are no restrictions that way, and there are no barriers that would prohibit them from doing so.
But they have to be a licensed ND. So.
Yes.
Right. So like a lot of people practice in unlicensed states, but they're licensed in Oregon or Washington or, Connecticut or wherever. So you absolutely have to be a licensed ND because we can't have an unregulated thing, but you don't have to be in a license.
Right. Yeah, great distinction. Thank you, Corey.
Yep.
Okay, so this one has a little bit of overlap. We can go deeper on this by itself, but it does touch upon some themes that came up about the relevance of lifestyle. The question is, will the certifications involve naturopathic modalities like herbal medicines, etc.?
Absolutely. I mean, our questions have a lot of naturopathic modalities like botanical medicine, clinical nutrition, a lot about lab testing and diagnostics, but definitely we include the naturopathic modalities. It's really in the forefront, I would say.
Yeah, and not only that, I would argue that in a lot of ways, endocrinology is, I think of it as a connection point between a lot of symptoms and pathology and lifestyle. So this is a place in which our skills and our acumen in lifestyle medicine, as Andrew mentioned, really comes to the forefront. Hormones are where the rubber meets the road in terms of all that. So very much so, it's focused on naturopathic therapies and practices.
Corey, when can we expect that the blueprint would be available to our members?
Well, you just put out something, so we could certainly share it with everybody. Typically, blueprints are usually shared with those taking the test, not everybody in the past, but we could talk about that at our next board meeting and figure out when and where and how.
Or even if we had a way of, we could explain what the test covers. Basically the sections cover each of the glands that Dr. Christensen mentioned at the beginning, and then each one is broken down into kind of anatomy, pathophysiology, and therapeutics. And if, I would imagine, like, if I knew nothing about the EndoANP and I was considering whether or not I wanted to take the test, seeing what's going to be on, that would be interesting for me. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be the exact blueprint, but I know that the naturopathic blueprint for the, what were those tests we took so long ago? Yeah, NPLEX, thank you. I mean, those, that blueprint is available.
We forgot about that.
I know.
Erased it from memory.
Yes, well, I see no reason why we couldn't. So that's something we could absolutely discuss and then make available on the EndoANP member site as a resource.
I think something to think about too is maybe a little bit different than what I remember on taking board exams in general. It was a little while ago, but I felt like when I took our exam, when we were going through it and in writing it, being in clinical practice, it's not everything was like, how can we trick the person into getting it wrong? That's not the whole point of the exam. Right. It was, what is imperative that we need to know to practice excellent medicine? So by nature of that, like a lot of the really important concepts that we need to know to be experts in endocrinology is definitely on the exam. And the strange, rare, and peculiars are pretty much not there that often.
No.
Yeah, it was not a game of Trivial Pursuit, like what with NPLEX was. Another question we had here was, what kind of fees are being charged by ND specialists? Always a funny thing to talk about money publicly, but there's the question, so let's make some sense out of that.
Is the question kind of implying if you're a specialist, can you charge more for your area of expertise? Is that what you think the question is implying on?
I think it's seeing if specialists do earn more. if there is a difference that way.
Well, certainly in conventional medicine, the specialists do charge charge more and earn more traditionally. I personally don't. I love endocrinology, practice a lot of endocrinology, but practice it within a very generalized practice, and so I don't distinguish one from the other. Everyone gets the same treatment. What about the rest of you? How do you manage it?
I think that I have grooved my own area of specialty and expertise in my practice over the years, and I have raised my prices over the years. And so I think that when you have a waiting list and you have a successful practice and you have patients that are waiting to see you and they want to see you for your area of expertise, I think that there's a natural deepening of the groove of seeing more of what you're good at treating. And if you have a waiting list and your prices are naturally going to go up over the years of practicing medicine, I think that it's kind of an organic process. And I feel okay charging what I'm charging because I'm a lot faster at recognizing patterns now than I was 11 years ago. So I think that it's a natural process. So I think that you could let it happen that way, but I don't think that you have to. That's been my experience.
I'm not sure why if someone didn't want to earn more, that they wouldn't have to. No one's going to come throw money at you. If someone were opposed to that. I did see some data in our profession, about distinction of specialists and generalists. And it looked like there was a substantial difference. I quoted those numbers last time, so I'm afraid to go off the top of my head and be wrong, but if I remember correctly, it was a 50% difference or greater. And as Andrew mentioned, that's quite well documented in the conventional community as well. There's a strong distinction that way between specialists and generalists. Like Leela, I've practiced for a while and been niched in an area of focus. And yeah, when you've got a high demand for your services and you can't see people anymore because of that, it only makes sense to raise the rates. So in terms of practice growth and volume, I certainly saw that as I did make a more clear public acknowledgement of the specialty, that everything just got exponentially easier. It was that whole inflection point, like a whole hockey stick, phenomena of how far in advance I would be booked and therefore what the rates would make the most sense for. And I'd also argue, I think that there's almost a sense about feeling bad or unjust for charging for our services. And early along, I think I had some of the starving artist mentality. I tried to take care of people regardless of their financial situation. And I saw that it did not serve my patients. They did not follow through with care. They did not improve clinically, and they saw less value in what they were receiving. And in the big scheme of things, the average middle-class consumer, they will spend money quite readily on a daily trip to Starbucks or things along these lines. I mean, they can afford our services, even if we're at the higher end of that. And when they are, it's the whole saying about skin in the game. When they've got skin in the game, they take things more seriously and they try harder. And the extent to which we do value and honor the effects of lifestyle, we need them to be involved and engaged.
This is a great follow-up.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, go for it, Fiona.
So I was going to say as well, I agree that as I've gotten more and more knowledgeable about my area and my waiting list has gotten longer, it just came naturally that I should charge more because, I'm giving a lot more value within that visit. I can do within 3 visits what someone else might take 3 months to do. And so the value is there, and you just start to feel, I think we have a lot of guilt about money in our profession, right? It starts right from school, and we're not taught to value, going after that extra knowledge and giving that value. And when you're giving that value, you just sort of feel less, you feel better about charging what you're worth because you've spent money and time learning what you know. And so I just feel like I'm giving exactly, what is right for what I'm charging.
So a question, and you guys all are in different states and countries for that matter, was talking on this topic. How does that work with insurance? like charging more? Like
I can very quickly bow out from that. I've been in cash practice from day one. I have no insurance experience.
Me too.
really?
So in Ontario,
Excellent, excellent. Me as well. Yeah, I took it initially, but then it became so much of a hassle. I just didn't want to deal with it. It seemed that as time went along, it became more and more complex. I have a colleague who has 2 offices and 4 other doctors working with him. And I remember speaking to him, and he was bemoaning the fact that he was taking insurance. And I said, "Why are you saying that?" And he said, "I'm paying 2 people $125,000 a year just to process insurance claims, and it's eating me alive." So, as the old expression goes, there's no free lunch. If you can get a good cash practice going, I agree with Alan. I think that's the way to go.
I'd like to hear from Fiona because she has the Canadian perspective. And then Nicole, do you take insurance? If you're on still.
I've never taken insurance either, but the one thing that I definitely do is at the very get-go, if anybody asks, it's explaining the value of our visit and why you're paying for what you're doing. You know what I mean? Why we're valuable. And it's just, I guess also being in California, it's not usual that we're covered anyways. So it might be a little different scenario if I was practicing in Portland. But I think that when you specialize, it would lend itself to being able to easily do cash-based practice anyways, if you're thinking about that. Or if you're somebody that's caught in the insurance system, setting yourself apart from every other naturopath because you have a specialty body of knowledge or whatnot is something that might be a second thought for you and can potentially provide you with a good income.
yeah, absolutely. In Canada, everything is in our healthcare system is paid for by the government, except for naturopaths and some other private healthcare providers. But we are covered by extended health insurance, which gives people, if they work for a corporation, for example, they get extra insurance, and they'll usually get like $500 to $1,000 of insurance for us per year. We typically up here don't process that ourselves in our clinics, but some patients will choose, doctors just because they want to use their insurance. They do have to submit the receipt themselves. The insurance only covers a certain amount per visit. I charge more than that, and I've never found it to be a problem. So basically, the insurance will cover whatever they will, and then the patient will pay the rest. And I think if people are looking for your knowledge, they don't mind paying the rest at all. Like they want your knowledge, they want the specialized knowledge, they don't want to waste their time. They want to get better as quickly as possible. And so I think in Ontario, where if you do charge a bit more than what the insurance companies will cover, it really doesn't matter if you're giving them the value.
Other comments about specialist fees versus generalist fees? That was our last pre-submitted question. So if there's other comments on that, let's take them. Otherwise, we can open up to live ones at this point.
Great. I would love some live ones. So I'm the only one who can see the back end of things, so I'll be the moderator. Hopefully nobody uses any fancy words that I can't pronounce. But yeah, go ahead. Anybody who's on here, if you have any questions, following up on things we already talked about, brand new things about specialization. And like I said, they can be general specialization questions too.
General specialization questions?
Well, I hear it. I hear it now. I meant general as in not necessarily endos.
Sorry.
No, it was perfect. Let's see here.
Just thought it was funny.
Where did the question box go? Okay. Oopsies. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, this is just an FYI from one of the one of the attendees that says, we're going through a total rebranding and our marketing firm stated your pricing was a huge effect on how you're perceived by potential patients and the public.
Mm-hmm.
So basically,
Perceived value.
yeah.
You know, it's a funny thing. I've coached doctors in terms of their practices and their growth, and I've been through this myself personally. And what commonly happens when someone does have a clear marketing niche and they then raise their prices, say they're already just booked out, what happens is that there's a small amount of blowback that's inevitable, and there'll be 5-10% of people that are upset, like, who are you to charge this? And we're used to things the way they were, and that happens. But then immediately afterwards, the demand increases, like in a matter of no time at all. However much they were booked out, they're booked out for longer. So it's shocking how commonly I've seen that, but it's just very, very consistent.
Absolutely. We had another comment here, and I just want to clarify, so I'm going to say it out loud and then they can type it. But just this is a very interesting topic and would make for a good standalone webinar. And I just wanted to clarify if they were talking about just kind of this whole like insurance billing, if that was the piece, because I don't know when that question came in. It came in just recently. And so if somebody could clarify the piece of the conversation that they thought would be just a good kind of standalone, because we could definitely dig into some of these in greater detail in the future. Oh no, more about the cash-based practice. Like what would that look like and switching, like Nicole had mentioned. Yeah, that would definitely be interesting and good. And again, that could be an interesting practice management series, right? Where we talk about cash and insurance in one, and then we talk about branding in one, things like that.
Well, the tough thing is that the insurance model is completely built around a structure that's opposite from what we do. You know, it's not at all built around recognizing the value of lifestyle or services or the healthcare that we offer. So it's just an uphill battle all the way for that. And when I attend other events, things like the A4M or IFM or ACAM or whatnot, all those events are comprised of primarily are MDs and DOs that are desperate for any way to get out of insurance practices. They're just looking for some other model. And then we have so many in our profession that are trying to get into insurance practices, or we fit even worse. So it makes no sense at all.
If I can
it's an interesting, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say that this whole insurance thing, for me, obviously, since I've never taken insurance, I am biased because I do a cash-based practice. But since day one, I've been in practice over 12 years. You know, I've been financially stable and able to make a good living. And I wasn't even a specialist back then. I mean, in nature, I'm going through the process, and maybe that's part of being on the board. I am actually going through the process of kind of identifying myself more in a marketing wise or branding wise as a specialist. But by the nature of what we do, we are already specialized in natural medicine, and then we're furthering that in the endocrine field if you so say you're in board certified naturopathic and in endocrinology. But for me, I think that if you truly believe the service that we're giving is specialized and is worthy of it, I mean, it's not something that you're going to get in an insurance-based system. I mean, most people they're looking to us because they have not had answers for their said paid for GP visit type of thing, or they've been on seeing every specialist in their insurance system and they still don't have answers, and then they come and show up at our clinic. And for me, I really don't have any kickback. My prices have raised significantly over 12 years. And it's interesting. People value you when you do really good service, and you're also confident in what you do and the value you place in things. And that to me has been a huge benefit, is that, I serve my patients with all my heart, but I'm also confident in what I do. And no one judges me and says, oh, you should be charged for what you do because you're not good enough at it. No one has ever said that. And I think that is, when we talk about poverty mentality in naturopathic medicine, maybe it's not just that, maybe it's we should be confident in knowing that our medicine is absolutely amazing. And even more so if you are a specialist who's taken time or years and years of practice and extra education to offer patients something that they can't get through the typical visit. And so, yes, we're cash based and we charge a premium for it because the service is unique and valuable. And that's just something that I found that's worked very well for me when I ask for money from patients.
Yeah,
Cheers.
very, very well stated. One of the interesting things about a cash basis is that it's important to keep the business to be very, very crisp and very almost isolated. Again, to your comment that our medicine is worth what it's worth. Be confident in the charge. Be sure that you're paid on time. Never take a post-dated check because that constitutes a loan. And always be very, very clear about the value of what it is that you've done so that you avoid the dreaded chargeback if you take a credit card for your payment. So there's some mechanical aspects that emerge from being confident in what you're doing and keeping the business very, very crisp and simplistic, simple Simon and the Fineman, if you will.
Great. We have another question here. Are people good with that question? Move on to the next one. This is a really interesting question because Alan and I have been on an email chain with this with other boards, and I've experienced this with other boards. Can you use the term endocrinologist as a specialist? So I'll give my simple-ish answer, which is every place is different, and every state is different, and every country is different, every province is different. The main thing that I have been told, well, different states, Arizona and Washington are the two most progressive states when it comes to specialization. Arizona actually does have a path to call yourself specialized in naturopathic.
Arizona and progressive in the same sentence.
I know, right? We're doing lots of contradictions. But they are in the you have to have applied for your accreditation body to be one of the approved. So like ABNO for the oncology group, the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology, which is like their branch of board certification, they submitted for, FABNOs to be an accredited specialty within Arizona law, and that got passed. But other people, so since that got passed, they can use the term naturopathic oncologist, but nobody else, a non-FABNO, can't claim that they're a naturopathic oncologist in the state of Arizona. As far as the IST at the end of things, what I've heard, the legal thing that I heard, which is stuck with me, which really makes sense to me, is you can't covet the generic of what you are. So oncologist, endocrinologist, pediatrician, those are generic terms for someone who sees an oncology patient or someone who sees an endocrine patient. You can't say you're a medical oncologist, and you would always have to qualify. So you could never say you were an endocrinologist. You would always have to qualify it by saying a naturopathic endocrinologist. But the medical community can't own the term endocrinologist. They can own the term medical endocrinologist. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of some of the legal language that came out of like the Washington discussion, which has always stuck with me. I don't pretend to have a law degree. I don't pretend that necessarily is the be all end all. But what I've always said is I think it's important as a profession that we do have a term that we're comfortable with. And then if individuals want to step back from that because of where they are, they can do that. So there's a lot of I'm going to use FABNOs because that's an established one. There are a lot of FABNOs who do not they use FABNO at the end of their name, ND FABNO. And sorry, FABNO is the oncology board certification, a fellow to the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology, for those who might not know that. They'll say that on their business card, but then underneath they will not say naturopathic oncologist. They'll say board certified in naturopathic oncology, or like kind of a little bit of a tweak on the word, because for them where they are, they know that naturopathic oncologist is going to not go well with their conventional counterparts. And especially in a field like oncology, you're often working with the conventional side. That might not be as much of an issue with the field of endocrinology. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's good as a profession that we have a term and we stand by that, but then individuals can choose to, you know, ease off of it if they feel in their jurisdiction or in their area that they don't feel comfortable using that. So that's my little 2 cents. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to add to that.
Pretty
Well, I
confident.
can tell you a little bit about
Right.
what goes on in the state of Connecticut. I gave a lecture at the University of Bridgeport last week on dealing with the health department in the state of Connecticut that in essence determines our scope of practice. And because our statute is so generally and non-specifically written, what it really comes down to is, are you going to ruffle the feathers of a local MD that they think you're going to take business away from them and they want to challenge you? And so what you end up doing in the state of Connecticut is putting an ad in the local paper using that terminology and let it ride for a couple of months. And if there's no problem, then there's no problem. If there is, it's usually a cease and desist. And what happens is the MD gets riled, they talk to the local medical board, the medical board talks to the commissioner of the Department of Public Health. You get a letter from him and he says, the MD say you can't do it, and I agree. And that's that. That's the way it goes in Connecticut, very draconian. That's the way it is. So I'll try it. I'll let you know what happens in Connecticut. Run it out there. I love crossing swords with Hartford. So.
Are there questions there, Corey?
Can't hear you, Corey.
Sorry, as I mumbled to myself on mute. Let's see. A lot of comments. Thanks for this lecture. Super interesting. Insurance, yuck. I like that one. Any other questions that people have? We got pretty in-depth into the ones already submitted, so
True.
let's see.
Good then.
Anybody? Bueller? You can also remember that if you have like a more in-depth question, you can raise your hand, and I can always unmute your line if you'd rather ask it out loud instead of typing out something. Since I'm not getting a question, I'm going to ask a poll question of people who are on here. Of the people who are on the call, how many would be interested in specializing in endocrinology? You could just put a little yes or Y or whatever. Well, those are some quick responses. We're getting lots of.
What were the responses? What'd you get there?
I'm like,
okay.
oh, yes, Jennifer, yes, Shannon, yes, Amy, yes. Awesome. That's great. Well, we're glad we're here to provide this. I do, and then I'll pass it off to, I do want to say, and this was said earlier, I do think it's really important. I mean, obviously the topic of this, webinar is specialization, and we are a specialty society. But I also, and I believe Leela talked about this really well, I also want to make sure that it's really clear that the EndoANP is a specialty area, but we are open to everybody. I never want it to be, we have this path of board certification and true specialization, but everybody is welcome. If you're interested in this area of specialty, you are more than welcome to join this. So for anybody who might be listening to this Q&A, don't feel intimidated that you're not specialized and don't want to be specialized. You just want to learn more information. This is absolutely the place for you. So I just wanted to kind of bring that topic back around and reiterate that.
Well, and something we've seen too, we're big fans of specialization in all the groups, and many members of the EndoANP are members of the ONC-ANP or the PEDS-ANP, and that's totally fine. People have, multiple areas that they can have deeper interest in and participate as members in various groups for those purposes.
For those attendees, please share the recording. We'll probably be sending out a recording, but please help us spread the word. You know, share the recording if we send it out with your friends on social, or share it with any of your colleagues that you think that might be interested in learning about us. And I think, just so in case you don't know, our website, it's endoanp.org.
And we have
a
couple other questions that are popping up now. I knew as soon as we started doing, some questions come. So somebody was, when is the next EndoANP webinar, which is perfect, because I was going to say that at the end, but I'm going to say it right now because Dr. Leila Turner, who's here on my
to me.
Thank God we're not doing adjustments, huh? Yeah.
We have a webinar next week. So this is kind of an off webinar. We have bi-monthly, if not monthly webinar. Bi-monthly, I should say every other month, but we try to do every month webinars. We don't have one in December because of the holidays. But we have one next Wednesday with Dr. Leila Turner on menopause, menopausal insomnia. And so you should all, it's for members. If you're a non-member, you can attend for a fee, and that actually will be on the website tomorrow to just register for a standalone webinar. But otherwise, as a member, you guys actually should have gotten the registration link reminder about that today as well. And you can email me if you have questions about that, and you'll get lots of reminders over the next week. But details can be found on our EndoANP website. There's an upcoming events calendar, so you can see that. You can always email us too with topics, or if you have somebody in mind that you'd like to suggest, or if you yourself would be interested in giving a webinar, we're very open to that. So definitely let us know. Next question. Any specifics on date of application, years of experience, board exam, etc.? I'm assuming that's all board certification related. And I can absolutely go a little bit more into detail with that in a couple of minutes, or, just kind of sum it up. But again, I think our plan is to send out the application in the next couple of weeks. A general time frame is we usually allow people about 2 to 3 months to to have a kind of an open application period, kind of gathering all the things you need to gather, writing up your cases, etc. And then we usually need about a month to review those cases and score them and do that. And then once you're approved to sit for the exam, then again, you get the blueprint outline and the reference study guide list. And again, we usually like to allow about 3 months for study time. So if I kind of span that timeline out, that ends up being about next summer for an exam time. As far as years of experience, it's if you haven't done like a residency or kind of some things to kind of be a little bit more focused from the get-go, you have to have been in practice for at least 5 years, with the last 2 being focused in endocrinology, and that the term focused, I'm using air quotes, meaning a certain number of patient contacts. I think we put, I'm not looking at it right now, we put a percentage on that. I want to say it's like 70.
I think it was 80%.
Or 80%, but somewhere in that. All the groups have kind of a different threshold for that, but that's associated with a patient contact, right? Because a percentage is a good general grasp, but somebody who's in practice 2 days a week versus 5 days a week, their 80% is very different, right? So we kind of equated that to a patient contact number. So it's an approximate. And date of app, yours. The board exam is a 200 question multiple choice exam covering those different areas. I won't get too in detail of how it gets scored, but there's a whole kind of cut scoring process where hopefully a couple of weeks away or a week away from signing a contract with a new testing agency, kind of with all these specialty groups, the PDANP and the ONC-ANP. So it's all kind of a psychometrically valid method, and we haven't discussed this exactly as the board, but there's options for both brick and mortar options, going to a physical location, and there are potentially some kind of online proctored, where somebody essentially, like we're videoing right now, is essentially watching you take the exam, which is an interesting concept. Wow. And it totally to me has its pros and cons. it seems a little odd to like take your board exam, sitting in your bedroom drinking your coffee, which you could potentially do, but actually studies have shown that that's actually more secure having a one-on-one person who's kind of trained to look and see, are you looking down here, as opposed to just being in a room where there's a proctor, somewhere kind of. So anyway, as a board, we haven't officially decided, what method, but one of those, and if it is the brick and mortar, there are sites all over the United States, in all 50 states. They have affiliates in Canada. So while you may have to travel to kind of a near a big city, it shouldn't be anything where it's like, oh, it's only offered in, 4 locations. So you have to make a big travel arrangement. So yeah, hopefully that answers a little bit more details. Like I said, the application will be going out in a couple weeks, so you can really see like all of the nitty gritty, but hopefully that gave you that next little bit of information to kind of get you through. Let's see.
One other thing too we might want to just mention is that coming up on the end of the year here, we're going to be needing people to be nominated or nominating colleagues that they think might be of value to join our board. I think we have 2 spaces available for board members. So for those of you watching, just FYI, if anyone's interested in being on the board with us,
awesome.
Those applications will be going out soon too.
Great. Another question that came out is, where can we currently get continuing education focused in endocrinology? So we have
Here we are.
we have our webinar schedule coming. Another benefit, if you're not already a member, is, and we're actually, it's been down for a couple weeks, but because we're working on kind of this new members only site, but we have all of our archived webinars also available for you. So when you become a member, you also get access to this kind of backlog of webinars for your learning pleasure. And again, as we're kind of, regrouping and kind of, and in many ways kind of relaunching ourselves with, this kind of new focus and new enthusiasm, we're also looking for different ways too that we can offer different continuing education and member resources. So not just in the form of webinars, but what are other handouts or reading lists or research links, or just different opportunities and different benefits that we can give to you as members. So that's all stuff that we're really working hard to develop and really have a renewed commitment to. So we're really excited to provide that all for you guys. Let's see. Most of the conferences focus on everything, which is great, but more specific events. That's a really good point. Alan, do you want to talk like really briefly, even though we don't have this fully planned, about our idea for a retreat in the spring?
For sure. So we've talked about hosting a small group retreat in which we can focus and do some breakout sessions that are in subtopics and also in business development. This might be a group of perhaps 30 or 40 and a couple of days to go deep into your practice, both the clinical side of it and the business side of it. So we're really excited about that, and stay tuned for more details to come.
Definitely. Okay, some other ones here. Is the association working with state associations to become approved, so when passing the boards we can start using designations? So yes. And again, it's a big topic. On an upside, this is something where we're working together with other specialty groups, because this is not a unique thing to the EndoANP. And actually, we're working with AANP because if, as we're an official affiliate of the AANP, if we have their backing, that also kind of helps this whole process along. But that's, like I said, that's a little bit slow moving. So we don't want to hold up moving board certification forward just for it to figure out all of its legal pathways through all the different states. We'd rather get it going and then, be recognized, hopefully soon. Other questions? Oh, great. I already have somebody who said they'd be interested in being a board member. So yay.
Yay.
We're
That's
fun.
Awesome.
We're fun. We are fun.
We're a lot of fun.
Okay, great. And I'll spread the word. Awesome. Okay. Well, we're a few minutes over. I mean, not that we exactly said 1 hour on the dot, but I'm not seeing any other questions in there. But thanks for all the feedback. So yeah, unless anybody on the board has any kind of closing comments, statements.
It's an exciting time for the organization. We're happy that everyone came tonight and enjoyed being able to connect with you all and talk through these topics. And yeah, let's get on out there and keep on doing a better job for our patient base and grow and promote our profession and have a blast while we're doing it.
And the last plug I'll give for this too, to anybody that's listening, but also people who are listening to the recording of this for our members, let's continue the discussion on our Facebook members only group. If you're listening to this recording and this spurs on a question you have for us, post it on the Facebook group. If you think of a question 2 weeks from now, post it on there. Let's continue this discussion and build our community and our group. And so if you're not already a part of that, send us an email. We'll make sure you get added, or you can just search EndoANP members group and it should pop up and you can just request to join the group. So fantastic. Well, with that, everyone. Thank you everybody for being on here. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you all next week at our menopausal insomnia lecture.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.